The Wallace family's annual financial meeting was in full swing at Grandfather Harold's Napa Valley estate, where status was flaunted through vintage wine and luxury watches. I sat quietly in my $120.00 blazer from an outlet store, watching my relatives preen like contestants on a reality show. Emily, sweetheart. Aunt Sylvia's voice oozed fake concern as she adjusted her diamond tennis bracelet. Still wearing that interesting jacket? I have some Chanel pieces that might suit you better for these gatherings. I smoothed the fabric, hiding a smile. The same jacket she mocked had been worn in boardrooms where deals worth billions were sealed. Deals she couldn't even comprehend. The agents, I'm comfortable as I am, I replied evenly. Comfortable being broke, you mean? My cousin Brandon muttered from his spot near the wine bar, swirling his third glass of Pinot Noir, despite it being barely 11 a.m. How's that little admin job going? If they only knew. I didn't just work at Arden Capital Group, I owned it, but they never asked. Why would they? In their minds, I'd always been the overlooked one. Still there, I said mildly. How's the portfolio doing, Brandon? His jaw tightened. Everyone knew he'd torched half his inheritance on a failed startup, but the family pretended otherwise. Let's focus, Grandfather Harold commanded, his voice booming across the oak-paneled room. Family portfolio review. Ah, the annual ritual, where everyone tried to outshine the others with half-baked investment strategies. I've positioned us well in European markets, Victoria announced, flipping her salon-perfect hair. Before she could continue, a sharp knock echoed. Harold frowned. Enter. A courier stepped in, crisp uniform immaculate, holding a sleek envelope. Delivery for Miss Emily Wallace? The room froze. Nobody ever got personal deliveries during these meetings. It was practically a cardinal sin. That's me, I said, standing. Your quarterly statement from Zurf Private Bank, ma'am, requires a signature. The hush that followed was electric. Aunt Sylvia's champagne flute halted mid-air. Brandon's smirk evaporated. I signed with a steady hand, then glanced around the room. Shall we continue? You could have heard a pin drop. Brandon actually stopped swirling his Pinot Noir mid-air. Zurich Private Bank? Grandfather Harold's voice cracked slightly. Emily, what exactly? Thank you, I told the courier calmly, signing for the envelope. Every eye in the Napa Estate's mahogany-paneled room bored into me, tracking the heavy document as I held it. Victoria was the first to recover. Since when do you have offshore accounts? Her laugh was brittle. You can barely afford rent. I slid a finger under the seal and unfolded the statement slowly, deliberately, making sure the bold black number at the bottom was visible to anyone close enough to squint. $897,426,531.09. Brandon choked on his wine. Oh my, I murmured, letting the page flutter onto the coffee table as if it were a grocery receipt. Looks like my investments did fairly well this quarter. The room exploded. Chairs scraped. Voices overlapped. Relatives who'd spent a decade pretending I was irrelevant suddenly surged forward for a closer look. Victoria snatched the paper, her French manicured hands trembling. This is wrong, she stammered. You're nobody. You just pushed papers at some investment firm. I stood, smoothing my $120.00 blazer. The one they mocked. Actually, Victoria, I own Arden Capital Group, 51% for the last 6 years. But none of you ever asked which firm I worked for. Grandfather Harold's face turned a deep shade of plum. Arden Capital? His voice rasped. The same group buying half the San Francisco financial district? The very same. I smiled. Amazing what you can build when people underestimate you. Aunt Sylvia collapsed into a velvet chair, her diamonds clinking against the stem of her champagne flute. But you never said anything. All these years letting us think, she began. Letting you think exactly what you wanted to think, I finished. It's incredible how much you can accomplish when everyone assumes you're just the help. My phone buzzed, a notification about our latest acquisition, but that could wait. For now, I savored the sight of the Wallace family hierarchy collapsing like a house of cards. Brandon cleared his throat, desperate. You could maybe advise us on the portfolio? I laughed softly. Funny how a few hundred million changes people's perspective. The statement lay on the coffee table like a detonated bomb, its shockwave still rolling through the room. Years of condescension, snide remarks about my clothes, my job, my choices, obliterated by a single number. Grandfather Harold cleared his throat, his voice brittle. Emily, perhaps we should discuss this privately, as family. I glanced at my watch, a simple Timex that had scandalized them at last year's meeting. Actually, I said lightly, I have a board meeting to attend. But don't worry. I smiled at the sea of stunned faces. I'm sure Victoria has excellent insights about those European markets to share. As I strode toward the door, leaving chaos in my wake, I tossed one last parting shot over my shoulder. Oh, and Aunt Sylvia, about those Chanel hand-me-downs? I gestured at my $120 0-cents blazer. I think I'll stick with Target. It's served me quite well so far. The door clicked shut behind me, but not before I heard Brandon's strangled whisper. Did anyone even know she had a Zurich account? Oh, dear cousin, that was the point. The fallout spread like wildfire. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with messages from relatives who'd never bothered to save my number before. I ignored them all, calmly reviewing acquisition plans from my corner office at Arden Capital's San Francisco headquarters. The office they'd never visited, assuming I worked in some cubicle. Mrs. Wallace? Grace, my assistant, appeared in the doorway. Your grandfather is in the lobby. He's quite insistent. I tapped my laptop, pulling up the security feed. There he was. Harold Wallace, usually so commanding, now rumpled and out of place amid Arden's sleek glass and steel. Send him up, I said. And Grace, hold all my calls. 5 minutes later, Harold stood before me, eyes flicking from the city skyline to the abstract art on the walls. Nice space, he managed. Very impressive. Thank you, I replied smoothly, not offering a seat. I assume this isn't a social call? He cleared his throat. Emily, about the family portfolio. Given your obvious expertise, you want me to manage it? I finished for him. Well, yes. The same expertise I had last year, I said evenly. When you wouldn't even let me in the room? Silence stretched like glass about to shatter. And trust me, you're going to want to see what happens when I decide to break it. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter of this story. It's about to get even better. And the year before, I continued calmly, when you all laughed at my investment suggestions and handed everything to Victoria because, and I quote, at least she dresses like a proper financier. Harold's jaw tightened. He had the grace to look vaguely embarrassed. We may have been hasty in our judgments. Hasty, I smiled thinly, pulling up a series of charts on my monitor. Let's review those judgments, shall we? Last year, Victoria's European strategy bled 23% from the family portfolio. The year before, Brandon's foolproof tech picks tanked to 15%. Yes, well, meanwhile, I said, rotating the screen so he could see, Arden Capital averaged 43% annual returns for 5 consecutive years. But none of you ever cared enough to ask what I actually do for a living. A knock interrupted us. Grace stepped in, carrying a sleek stack of papers. The Singapore merger documents are ready for your signature, Ms. Wallace, and Mr. Chin from the Hong Kong office is online too. Thank you, Grace. Tell Mr. Chin I'll call him back after finalizing the billion-dollar expansion. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Harold flinch at the word billion. The same man who once advised me to aim smaller, be realistic. He cleared his throat. Emily, families should stick together, support each other. Surely you can see that managing the family portfolio is the right thing to do. I leaned back, letting silence stretch. You know what's fascinating about success, Harold? It exposes character. When you all thought I was nothing, I wasn't worth a seat at your table. Now that you know about my offshore accounts, suddenly I'm family again. That's not fair, he protested. We always considered you family. Really? I tapped a key, pulling up an old email. Like this one? where you warned everyone not to invest in my reckless career choices 5 years ago, the same year I acquired Arden Capital? His face blanched. How did you? I own one of the largest investment firms in the country, I said quietly. Did you honestly think I wouldn't have copies? My phone buzzed. Another acquisition update. The kind of deal they never believed I could handle. I studied Harold, watching him squirm. You know, I said softly, I did try to help. 3 years ago, I suggested investing in Asian tech markets, I said evenly. Victoria called it amateur hour, and Brandon told me to stick to filing paperwork. Harold swallowed hard. We were wrong, he admitted, but now that you know… What? I leaned forward, my voice cool. That I'm worth more than the entire family combined? I smiled faintly. Funny how money changes perspectives, isn't it? A knock on the door interrupted the tension. Grace stepped in, her tone professional. Miss Wallace, your helicopter is ready for the Shanghai meeting. Harold's jaw dropped. Shanghai? Yes, I said, rising and smoothing my $120.00 blazer, the same one that once earned me whispers at family dinners. Some of us work for our success instead of inheriting it. I walked him to the door, pausing just long enough to deliver the coup de grace. Oh, and Harold? That building where your office sits? I tilted my head, smiling. Arden Capital just bought it. You might want to let the family know rent's going up next quarter. The look on his face was worth every snide remark about my clothes, my career, my life choices. Success isn't just about making money. Sometimes it's about watching the people who underestimated you realize they bet on the wrong horse. 2 weeks after the Zurich account revelation, I sat in my glass-walled office overlooking the bay, reviewing an interesting proposal. The family's unbeatable portfolio companies were tanking, their stock down 40%. A perfect acquisition target. Grace's message popped up on my screen. Your cousin Victoria is here, says it's urgent. Send her in, I typed back. Victoria entered, draped in Dior, her usual armor of confidence cracked. Emily, she started, clutching her Hermes bag like a lifeline. We need to talk about the family portfolio. We really don't, I replied coolly, eyes on my monitor, where the purchase order for her favorite company glowed. It's falling apart, she admitted. The European investments lost another 40% this quarter, I finished. I know. I've been watching. She sank into a chair uninvited. How do you always know everything? Because while you were busy flaunting your Harvard MBA, I said, finally meeting her gaze. I was learning how markets actually work. Amazing what you can see when people think you're nobody. My phone buzzed. A message from Arden Capital's Hong Kong office, confirming the final details of our latest acquisition. Perfect timing. Emily, please. Victoria's voice cracked, the polished edge of her confidence gone. The family's losing everything. Grandfather had to sell his Napa vineyard. Brandon's trust fund is almost empty. Even Mom? Aunt Sylvia, I cut in, arching a brow. Still having trouble covering her country club fees? Shame about that rent increase on her boutiques building. Victoria's eyes widened. If that was you, you bought the building. I bought most of downtown, I corrected smoothly. While you were laughing at my Target suits, I was building an empire. Funny how that works. Grace appeared at the doorway, calm and efficient. Ms. Wallace, the board is ready for your announcement about the Hunter Group acquisition. Victoria gasped. Hunter Group, but that's my biggest investment. Was your biggest investment, I replied, turning my laptop so she could see the headline on the press release. Arden Capital acquires Hunter Group in $1,800,000,000 0 cents deal. You're destroying us, she whispered. No, Victoria, you did that yourselves. I'm just cleaning up the mess. I rose, straightening my simple blazer, the same one they once mocked. Would you like to know the real difference between us? She looked up, mascara smudged. I never needed designer suits or Ivy League titles to prove my worth. Success isn't about looking rich. It's about being smart enough to let people underestimate you until it's too late. A notification blinked across my screen. Deal closed. Hunter Group, Victoria's crown jewel, was now mine. You know what the best part is? I asked softly. Every time you mocked my clothes, my job, my life, you were mocking the person who would eventually own everything you valued. Her voice was barely a whisper. What happens now? Now, I said, glancing at the Timex on my wrist, you get to find out what real work feels like. The trust funds? Gone. The portfolio? Liquidated. The properties? Mortgaged. Her protest was weak, almost childlike. But we're family. Funny, I said, pressing the intercom. How that word only matters when you need something. Grace, I said without looking up, please show my cousin out and send in the board. We have an acquisition to celebrate. Victoria rose on shaky legs, clutching her Hermes bag like a lifeline. I'm sorry for everything. I know, I replied coolly. But here's the thing about success, Victoria. It doesn't care about apologies. It only cares about results. She hesitated, then walked out, her designer heels clicking unevenly against the polished marble floors of my empire. The same empire I built while they dismissed me as a nobody. My phone buzzed again. Uncle Harold, no doubt calling to beg for help with his ballooning debts. I hit decline, just as they declined every piece of advice I gave them for years. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't just success. It's watching those who underestimated you realize you now own everything they took for granted. I adjusted my simple blazer and stepped into the glass-walled boardroom overlooking the San Francisco skyline. Another billion-dollar deal was about to be inked, another piece of the Wallace family legacy dismantled, one company at a time. Because in the end, it's not about the labels you flash or the cars you drive. It's about the empire you build while everyone else is too busy pretending to matter. And mine? It's just getting started. The next morning, the financial headlines screamed. Arden Capital CEO Emily Wallace, the silent billionaire who reshaped a legacy. My phone exploded with calls and texts from relatives who had ignored me for years. Brandon's desperate message blinked on my screen. Please, I need a job, any position. I typed back. The mailroom is hiring. Time to learn what real work feels like. And Sylvia called in tears about her boutique's rent hike. Harold's voicemail begged for a meeting. Victoria's Instagram feed, once a shrine to luxury living, had gone dark. But I had no time to respond. Dressed in my $120 0-cents blazer and Timex watch, I was too busy closing another billion-dollar deal. Because true power isn't about flaunting wealth. It's about building it quietly while others waste their lives trying to look rich. And this was only the beginning. I built this empire in silence while everyone doubted me, mocked my choices and wrote me off as a failure. Now, here I am, standing at the top of the very industry they told me I'd never belong to. But this isn't just my story. It's a story for anyone who's ever been underestimated. If you've ever had people laugh at your dreams or tell you that you're not enough, let this be your reminder. Their opinions are not your reality. If my story inspired you, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment for me below. Tell me what you think of my journey so far and what moves you'd make if you were in my shoes. Would you forgive them? Would you teach them a lesson? Or would you build something so big they'd never doubt you again? And here's my advice. Stop chasing validation and start building quietly. Success doesn't need an announcement. It speaks for itself when the time is right. Stay focused, stay patient, and let them underestimate you. Because when the moment comes, your results will speak louder than any words ever could.